Labs. I've just started recording the meeting as well, so just so you're aware, this meeting will be recorded and provided to your administrators in your institute, so that anybody who couldn't make the training session today and the one scheduled for later this week will have a recording that they can refer to. Chem Inventory is browser-based software, meaning that you don't need to install any specific software to use it. It will run on any internet browser, and it also means it will run on any device as well. So I'm currently using a Mac to open Chem Inventory, but you can, of course, use Windows. Because it's browser-based, it does also mean you can use mobile devices as well. So you can run Chem Inventory through your internet browser on iOS or Android devices. There are some limitations with it, in the fact that you can't use the device camera currently to scan barcodes, but all other functionality is enabled and possible within the system. The screen size in the user interface just adjusts itself to the smaller size of your screen. So it will look slightly different than the demo that I'm running through now, but you can still access all functionality minus barcode scanning, unless you use a Bluetooth scanner. So Chem Inventory is browser-based software. I'm currently accessing it through Chrome on a Mac. And in terms of signing into your inventory, you can do that using a standard email address and password combination, which is how you'll be authenticating through your institute. What that means is that when an administrator sets up an account for users, that user will receive an email with an automatically generated password. When they sign in for the first time using that password, they'll then be able to set their own password themselves. So I'm about to sign in now to our demo inventory with administrator privileges. On the note of privileges, there are a range of different privilege levels within an inventory. At the highest end of the privilege scale, there is the administrator account, which is what I've just signed into. The next step down from that is what we call an order handler. I'll go through their privileges in a few minutes. The next step down from that is just a standard user. So users in the system are able to create container records, move them around, change container information, things like that. And finally, at the lowest end of the privilege scale, there is what we call a read-only user. And as the name suggests, these users are only able to view information. They're not able to edit anything. So I've signed in now to an account with administrator privileges. When users first sign in, they're taken to the search page, which is where they can search their inventory by name, and any results that are found are listed here on the right-hand side. So in this particular case, I've run a name search for Dipea, and there currently have been 2 containers that are found in the inventory, and these are listed in the results table here. One thing I wanted to highlight was that Chem Inventory will assign synonyms to your containers automatically if they are commercially available, so if they've got a CAS number. So in this particular case, even though my search term of Dipea didn't exactly match the container names that were entered for the 2 results, the system still found the relevant results using that synonyms feature. So that happens automatically when containers are added. So users don't need to do anything specific to add manually those synonyms. Another thing that's automatic is the assignment of chemical structures. And so while these may or may not be relevant depending on the type of research you're involved with, you can see the chemical structures for your containers by hovering your mouse over the container name. And in this particular case, it's not hugely interesting because there are only 2 containers of Dipea. That can become quite useful if you do structure searching, which I'll show you in a second. By default, containers are saved in a particular location. So all containers are required to be saved in your locations hierarchy. Your inventory hierarchy or your locations hierarchy is fully customizable, and I'll run through that in a few minutes. But basically, a location is where a chemical is actually found in the lab. So if someone searched for a chemical and they wanted to go and find, for example, this 50 ml bottle of Dipea, they know where to look to find it. And I'll go through the hierarchy again in a few more minutes. But basically, think of it as where a chemical is actually found in the lab. Users can interact with individual records using these buttons on the right-hand side. And I wanted to highlight the first one, which is the View Container Information button. This brings up all of the information saved against the particular container in your database. So on the left-hand side, you've got the chemical structure shown there. Underneath that, you have the GHS safety summary. which is assigned automatically by Chem Inventory. So we maintain a database of GHS hazard information for approximately the most 75% of most common chemicals saved across all of our customers. So there may be instances where that information is not saved for your inventory, but you can then populate it. And whenever a new container of the same substance is added in the future, that same information will be populated for it. So I'm going to zoom in a bit on the GHS safety summary, so hopefully you can see it okay. You've of course got the pictograms, as you can see. Underneath that, you've also got the hazard codes associated with that compound, and you can click on those hazard codes to see what they actually mean, and you can hover your mouse over the precaution codes there to see what those mean as well. The other information is broken between two main columns. So Chem Inventory has a range of default fields, such as container name and CAS number, but you can store or create any number of your own custom fields as well to store information alongside the range of default fields. And in this demo inventory, we've created two custom fields, expiry date and product code, but you can create any number if you need to store additional information. It's worth noting those custom fields can have a range of data formats, which changes the functionality slightly with how users can interact with them. So for example, our expiry date that we've created for this demo inventory is defined as a date field. And what that means is when users edit that information, there's a little UI here to select a date. But it also means that when users do searches, for example, for expiry date, you can search by date range. So if administrators or safety officers or whoever are looking for containers which expire within the next couple of months, they can run an advanced search by date range to do that. And that also can tie in with things like peroxide formers. So you can find out any bottles which have been opened more than 6 months ago, which may then need to be disposed of. Chem Inventory includes significant auditing features, which basically record any changes made to a container record. So for example, if a container is moved between locations, let's say someone goes and collects a particular container from a storage location and moves it into their lab or into their own fume hood, they can update that container location, and I'll show you how they can do that in a minute. But basically any change is then recorded in your inventory's logs. And for an individual container, the history of that container can be viewed by clicking on this View History button. So this brings up all of the changes to that container throughout its life. One thing I wanted to highlight, I'll zoom in again here, is that the date and timestamp for the change that occurred is recorded, the user that made the change, and you've also got the before and after values of that change as well. So you have full visibility across all changes made to a particular container, which can be useful for some regulations. For example, under the Chemical Weapons Convention, quantity consumption is needed to be reported, and so that can be saved in the system by updating, say, a field value representing the quantity remaining in the bottle. And so then that's saved with the date and timestamp in your logs. So in terms of moving containers, let's say someone goes and collects this container here from the cupboard 1 location in the lab, and they wanted to move it to their own fume hood or their personal location. They can do so by clicking on this Move Container to New Location button from search results. And so when that's opened up, they can go through and select where they'd like that new container to be moved to, click on the Move Container button, and that will update its location to where it's now found. So if somebody else does a search, they'll know where to look. There are quite a few other ways of moving containers around as well. One of the more common ones is using the Scan to Move tool available here in the top right corner. That can be very useful if you have barcode scanners in the lab, or say if you have a general storage location and you want to set up a scan in, scan out station, you can use barcode scanners to quickly move containers between locations. So let's say someone in your lab goes and collects a tray of chemicals, they take it then back to their own fume hood, they can then simply scan off all of the container barcodes into this tool to then update their location to wherever they've selected in this interface, or if they've scanned a barcode of a location, then that will move all those containers to where they've selected. So in terms of deleting chemicals, whenever a chemical has been completely used up and is ready to be removed from an inventory, the easy way of doing that is to click on this delete container button. So that will remove that container record from your active inventory so that when users do searches, that result will no longer be shown in results tables. It's worth noting that container records are saved permanently in your database, however, so that if administrators, for example, needed to go back through historical records, that's possible, and I'll show you how that can be done in a few minutes. So that's a very quick run through of interacting with container records, highlighting some of the more common day-to-day tools. I wanted to briefly highlight some of the methods of searching, just so you know what's available and what's possible. So I've demonstrated searching by name, or in this case, synonym. You can, of course, also search by CAS registry number and container barcode. If you create custom fields, they can be configured to be listed here on the search page directly as well. So for example, if people wanted to search by a lab code or by owner of a chemical, if you wanted to designate different members of your labs as owners, things like that. We also have the ability to search inventories by chemical structure. So let's say you were looking to find everything in your inventory which contained a pyridine ring. You could draw that structure there or load the structure from ChemDraw, Smiles, or Molfile. And then you can do, say, a substructure search for that. And in this particular case, there are 87 containers that have been found in the demo inventory with that particular structure. And you can scroll through that results list there to see those chemical results. So that can be quite useful when looking for particular functionality. Another thing that might be worth noting, depending on the type of research you're doing, is that Chem Inventory is fully compatible with chirality. So if you are looking for particular stereo centers, then that's absolutely supported in the tool. You can draw your up and down bonds as necessary, and the system will find relevant results for you based on what you've drawn. You can, of course, also search by wildcard bond. So for example, if you're looking for different diastereoisomers, that's absolutely okay as well. Other search options we've got are what we call the advanced search tool, which enable you to build multi-component queries to run against your database. And so that really enables you to fine-tune your searching if you're looking for more particular restrictions, such as the example I mentioned a couple of minutes ago for date range. You can set a start date and an end date, and the system will find all relevant results within the 2 dates that you've found. For example, for the default field of date acquired, or for any custom fields you might have created with the date data format. Underneath that, we've got the GHS search tool, which enables you to search your inventory by GHS hazard. So if you're looking for all carcinogens or all flammables, things like that, you can run a GHS search tool. So that's the search page in a nutshell. Moving now on to the add a container page. So there are 2 ways that container records can be added to an inventory. The first way is for individual container records, and that can be done from this add a container page. The other method we have is via our Excel import tool, which is available to administrators from the inventory management page. And I'll go through that in a little bit more detail because it will be very useful when you're getting your initial inventory set up and, say, bringing in your existing inventory information. So yeah, that's the Excel import tool that's designed to bulk import and create more than one record at once. And I'll go through that in more detail in a few minutes. But in the meantime, the add a container page can be used to create individual container records. So let's say you're looking to create a container of triphenylphosphine. You can put in the information as needed here. When you click on next, the system will create or generate, I should say, that structure for you automatically for that container based on the substance it holds. And it will also present to the user a GHS safety summary so that you're aware of any hazards that might be associated with that compound at the time that it's added. You can add in-house made compounds as well. So if your substance you want to save isn't commercially available, you can just leave this CAS number field blank or click on the no CAS number link there. And what that will do is the system will try to identify the substance based on the container name you've entered to generate things like a structure or to see whether or not that container has been added previously. And if it has been added previously, the system will preload or display things like the structure if you've saved it before and the GHS safety summary if it's been saved for that compound so that you don't have to enter it again. So in terms of adding a compound that might be new, let's say I wanted to add a compound called Daniel's custom compound, I can enter in the name here, or you could use a lab code or whatever it is you wanted to do. When I click on next, the system will try to identify that substance, and in this case, it won't have seen it before. And so what I'm able to do then is click on this No Structure Found button here to then draw a structure as needed. So for example, you can go through and draw whatever it is that your compound is, if you wanted to do that. You don't have to draw a structure if you don't want to. And whenever you're ready to then to add that container record, you can click on the Add Container button here. We also have a quick add tool, which simplifies things a bit. So this is for compounds which are commercially available or have a CAS number. Basically what it does is pre-populates the container name for you based on the CAS number. And there's a simplified interface here, which minimizes the number of steps that you need to go through to add a compound. Adding compounds during this demo has taken a little while because I've been talking through each step, but both using the quick add tool or using the add a container page generally is quite fast. And so it doesn't take too long to add records. It may be faster, however, if you do have lots of records to add, such as say 10 or 15 at a time, to use the Excel import tool, but I'll run through that in a few minutes. One last thing to note about the quick add tool is that it enables you to add more than one container of the same substance at once. So if you have, say, 5 bottles of acetone that you want to add to your inventory, you can put in the CAS number for acetone, and then at the bottom left corner here, there's a link that says adding multiple containers. You can click on that and then adjust the number of containers that you want to add into the system. And during this time, you can assign different barcode numbers to those extra containers as well. So the way barcoding works in Chem Inventory, and I'll cover this in a little bit more detail when we get to the inventory management page, is basically a barcode acts as a unique reference or a unique identifier for every container in your inventory. So basically, if you wanted to move an individual container around between locations, you can scan the barcode to move it as needed. One other major feature for that, using barcodes, is the stock take tool, which I'll go through in a few minutes. But also from a regulatory compliance perspective, it can be useful as well. For example, to report on consumption of particular chemicals within, say, a 12-month period. Using barcodes helps you maintain records of levels of or quantities of materials for regulated chemicals between years. So that's the add a container page in a nutshell. Moving now to the locations page. I mentioned before that your locations hierarchy in your inventory represents where chemicals are actually found in the lab. And so the locations page enables you to browse your inventory by location. So if I wanted to see everything that was in cupboard 1, I could browse to that part of my hierarchy. And the results table here on the right-hand side is exactly the same as on the search page. So I can interact with individual container records using these buttons on the right. I can download results from this table if need be into an Excel file. That's also available on the search page, but I thought I'd mention it here, and things like that. Your locations hierarchy, and I'll zoom in a bit so hopefully you can see a bit better, is fully customizable. There are no limits on the number of locations that you can have in your inventory, and there are also no limits on the number of breaks in your hierarchy from parent folder to sublocation. So for example, the location that we're looking at now, cupboard 1, is basically one level down in the hierarchy within this cupboards folder. And if I open up this organic B location, you can see that that one's 2 levels down in the hierarchy, but there are no limits on the number of levels. So if you wanted a hugely detailed hierarchy, for example, from building number to room number to cabinet number, shelf number, tray number, or whatever it is you wanted to do, you can do that. Likewise, if you wanted to have a very broad structure like we've got here, or a broad hierarchy, that's also possible. The locations editing interface can be accessed by users with the top 2 privilege levels, so administrators or order handlers, and they can do that by clicking on this edit button. So that will bring up this editing interface. Basically, it's relatively straightforward once you've got the hang of it. You can create new locations by clicking on the Add New button, as the name suggests. So let's say I wanted to create a new location named after myself. If I wanted then to move that location into the hierarchy, I can simply click and drag it, where I want it to go. So I'm going to put it now inside that organic parent folder. And when I close the editing tool and open up my locations hierarchy, you'll see that there's now that Daniel folder in there. Deleting locations is again fairly similar. You browse to the one you want to delete, click on the delete selected, and the system will remove that from your inventory. There is a support page available which runs through this in more detail, and you can click on this by just on the interface here, and this will open up our support pages, and it's taken us to the, or taking me to here to the editing your locations tree section. So this page it's opened up as a general overview of locations in an inventory. One other thing I wanted to point out before moving on was that there are no limits anywhere in Chem Inventory in in character set used. So if you wanted to, for example, store chemicals based on different classifications and therefore wanted to use Greek characters in your location names, that's absolutely okay. Likewise, if you wanted to create a user account that had accents in it, for example, for people who are not from the UK or other English-speaking countries, then you can also use characters that includes completely different character sets such as Cyrillic or Mandarin or Japanese, as well as standard accented characters. So Chem Inventory does fully support any character set in any field. The SDS and file storage page is where you can go to upload files and link them to substances within your inventory. Users can then download files directly from search results. So in this demo inventory, we've uploaded 2 SDS files. One is for TMS diazomethane and the other one is for triphenylphosphine. Those files have been automatically linked to the applicable substance based on the fact that in this case, there's a CAS number in the name. And in the triphenylphosphine case, there's a CAS number present within the first few pages. So that Chem Inventory uses that to automatically link files. If there isn't a CAS number present, the system will fall back and try and use the file name to link it to the applicable substance. And if that doesn't work, then you have the option of manually linking the file as well. So to show you what it looks like when a user wants to download a file, let's say I do a search now for TMS diazomethane. One container has been found in my inventory. And if I click on the container name to open up its container information view, you'll see here under this SDS and linked files section, there is a link that I can click on to download that uploaded file directly from search results. So that can be useful to help users have access to the most up-to-date safety information right from search results. At the moment, we don't supply any SDS files from our end. And the reason for that is basically suppliers, so chemical manufacturers, retain copyright over their documents, which prevents us from distributing them publicly. We are hoping to get around that later this year by maintaining a database of links directly to supplier websites. So basically we will curate and manage this database of SDS links that when users click on them will take them directly to the supplier website where the SDS file is hosted by the manufacturer. So we're hoping to release that over the next few months, and that will be made available to all customers. So keep a lookout for that update in due course. In the meantime, though, you can upload your own safety documents here if you wanted to. This page, though, isn't limited to just SDS files. You can actually upload any file type. So if you're looking to upload, say, a Word document for lab preparation documents or safe operating procedures or risk assessments, or say an image file for characterization information, you can upload that and link it to the appropriate substance from this page. So that can be done by clicking on this Upload Files button in the top right corner, and you can then either browse to the files you want to upload or say drag and drop a folder into the interface, and the system will process them automatically. The final couple of pages I want to run through are available to users with administrator privileges and can be accessed from the left-hand navigation bar here. So the first page is the inventory management page, which is where administrators can go to create user accounts or modify existing ones. You can say change the privilege level associated with an existing user, or remove a user's account whenever they have, say, left the lab. There are no limits on the number of users within your lab, and there are also no limits on the number of people with different privilege levels. So for example, if you wanted everybody in your lab to have administrative privileges, that's okay. Likewise, if you wanted to maintain just one person with administrative privileges and everybody else with, say, read-only or user privileges, that's fine as well. You can do so from this page. The other functionality on this page is broken between three main menus. The first is the Inventory Tools menu, which is where our Excel import tool resides, and I'll go through that in a few minutes. There are three other actions on this menu that I wanted to highlight. The first is the Export Inventory link, which enables you to download a full copy of all of your inventory information into an Excel file at any time. So if you wanted to, say, take snapshots of your inventory to save them, then you can do so from this page. And also down track, if your institute decides to no longer use Chem Inventory, say in a few years' time, then you can export a full copy of your inventory at any time using this tool. The inventory sharing option enables you to share your inventory with other labs on site. And there are a few different sharing levels which are possible. So by default, the sharing is set to none. So basically your inventory can't be seen by other people within your institute. But if you did want to share your inventory, that you could set it to, say, restricted sharing with other research groups. And what that means is that on a case-by-case basis, you can choose different sharing levels for each research group within your institute. But basically, if it's restricted sharing, users in the other inventory, when they do a search, will see whether or not you have a chemical container in stock. So let's say they do a search for acetone, it will list in their results tables any containers that you have, but they won't see any other information associated with that, except for the container size and contact details for administrators in the group that is sharing. So that's restricted sharing. There's also the next level up from that, which is what we call full sharing, which basically gives the other inventory access to your inventory as if those users were members of your own inventory themselves. So it's a little bit complicated to sort of spell it out, explaining this by words, but have a play around and you'll see what I mean. Basically, with full sharing set, people can move containers in and out of your inventory, or edit container information, things like that. And so that particular sharing setting can be very useful if two research groups, say, share a physical lab and therefore they share their inventory with each other as well. The Watchlist Reports tool, and I'm going to open this one up to show you, is a tool which enables you to generate a regulatory report with one click. So I'll zoom in a bit here. Basically, what a watch list is a collection of chemical identities. And when you want to run a report on your inventory, the system will go through all of the chemicals you have saved and check whether or not the container that it's looking at is regulated on a list. And then at the end of a generation, the system will download a file to your computer detailing all of the chemicals which are on that watch list. So for example, for the Chemical Weapons Convention Schedule 2, I can click on the View Report button, and what the system will do is look for all of the chemicals in my inventory which appear on that list and summarize them for me. We maintain 4 watch lists at our end. So the Chemical Weapons Convention Schedules 2 and 3. We have the EU REACH candidate list, which may apply to you if you export chemicals to the EU. And we also have the DHS Appendix A list, which may apply if you export chemicals to the US. You can create any number of your own custom watch lists, however. So for example, if you're subject to things like the Home Office Drugs Precursors list, you may like to create a custom watch list, or it can be created at your institute level, which means that it's then defined and populated by default for all of the research groups within that site. And that will appear here in this custom watch list area. On the Barcodes and Labels menu, I wanted to highlight a couple of features. The first is this GHS label generator. If you needed to create GHS compliant labels for your containers, for example, for the container of Dipea we opened up before, you can do so using this tool. So that generates a GHS compliant label. You can adjust the dimensions if you have different label sizes in the top left corner here. And then when you're ready, you can download your labels as JPEG files. So then you can either position them in say a template file for printing onto address labels, or if you have standalone standalone label printers, you can print them directly from the image file. We also have a barcode generation tool. So I mentioned briefly before barcodes in Chem Inventory and the fact that they act as unique identifiers for your containers. The way that the barcode generation tool in Chem Inventory works is you can create sheets of barcodes, which can then be printed off onto pages of peel-off labels, such as those from Avery. So the barcodes that are generated are unassigned and fresh. So basically, whenever a new container is added to an inventory, the user can grab just the next available barcode and stick it onto the container and then scan it into the system to associate that barcode number with that particular container. So yeah, we've got the generation tool here, which you can use to create barcodes. If you already have barcodes associated with your existing inventory, that's no problem at all. You can import all of those existing numbers using the Excel import tool. I'll go through that in a second. So basically you don't need to re-barcode or anything like that. One of the main features that links with barcoding is the stocktake tool here. Basically, whenever a stocktake is active, users can go around the different locations in your inventory and scan off everything that's present. So any containers which are found will be ticked off as being there. Any containers which are saved in a different location than where it's scanned will be updated automatically in the system to represent where they're actually found. And at the end of a stocktake, any containers which weren't found at all can be moved into, say, a missing location or something like that. So we recommend that a stocktake is run once a year. It doesn't take long once a stocktake is started, because you can use barcode scanners to make the job very, very quick. And basically, if you run it once a year, it means that your inventory information is fully accurate and up to date, because it can be quite easy and relatively common for people to say forget to update the location of a chemical when they move it, if they go and say collect it from a storage location. So the stocktake tool helps capture that and correct any information that might have been accidentally missed out. Finally, the container tools menu is where you can go to create and edit custom fields, and administrators can also view any deleted container information from any point in time in the past from this page as well. So the Excel import tool, I'm going to go through this in a little bit more detail now because it forms a fairly crucial part of getting started with Chem Inventory. So when I first open this tool, the panel which appears just has a little bit of information about how the tool works, and I recommend when you run the tool, you read through this. One thing I wanted to highlight was that we do have an Excel template available, and you can download that from this info entry right at the bottom here. I've got the template open on my computer, and I'll switch over to that now so you can have a look. Fairly straightforward structure. Each column represents one field, while each row represents one container. And you can list as many containers as you want in this tool. I think the largest import the system has handled was for a customer we have in the States, which was about 55,000 containers at once. So you can import as many as you need using this template. So each column represents one field, and if you do have any custom fields you want to import, then you can add these as extra columns to the right-hand side. So in our demo inventory, we had expiry date and product code as our custom fields. So you can add those, and just like I have now, as extra columns for the import, and then you can populate the information for each of your containers as needed. One thing I wanted to highlight here was the locations column. I didn't mention this before while on the locations page, but Chem Inventory will build your locations tree for you automatically using this column information. So you don't actually need to build your locations hierarchy manually before running the import. You can just structure things in your Excel document and then import it straight away, and the system will build your hierarchy for you. So how it does that is it looks for this greater than character, and that represents a break in the locations hierarchy from parent folder to sublocation. So for this first entry, the system will look for a cupboards parent folder, within that an organic folder, and within that a B location. And if that structure doesn't yet exist, it will create that part of your locations hierarchy and then create the container record where it's meant to be in the B location. So that the system will build that hierarchy for you automatically. One thing to note is that the system ignores the case of words. So for example, if you had cupboards with a capital C or an uppercase C at the beginning in one entry, but a lowercase c in another, that doesn't matter. The system will treat them the same. Likewise, if you had, say, cupboards with a space in it, and then other entry cupboards without, the system will still treat those the same way. So you won't get a whole heap of different locations representing the same place. The other thing I wanted to highlight was the relationship between container name and CAS number. So the system uses CAS number as the primary substance identifier. So that's for things such as automatically assigning chemical information, such as synonyms and structures, and GHS information. And then if you don't supply a CAS number, the system will fall back onto the entered container name to try and identify the substance to assign the chemical information. If you currently have just a list of CAS numbers but no container names, that's no problem at all. The system will assign the container's IUPAC name to be the container name based on the CAS number. So that's no problem there. So you can just import CAS numbers directly if you wanted to. So once you've got your information inputted into your file as you need to, you can head back to this import tool, click on next step, choose the file that you want to upload by browsing to it on your computer, click on upload. The system will then dissect that file and try and link each of the column names with the appropriate Chem Inventory field. And it's done this for me automatically, so I don't need to do anything more now. I can then click on Start Import, and the system will import that Excel file that I've just uploaded. As a rough time guide, it takes around 5 minutes to import 1,000 containers, and you can leave the tool running in the background. So once you've uploaded your file and clicked on the Start Import button, the system will continue to process that file in the background, even if you close your browser session. So for example, if you have a lot of containers to import, you can upload the file, say, one afternoon, and then come back the following morning, and the system will have processed things overnight for you. So that's the import tool. So that's available from the Inventory Tools menu at the top here. So briefly before finishing the training session, I wanted to run through a rollout scenario for your lab. Basically, when an administrator first creates your inventory, you'll receive an email with your sign-in details. I mentioned briefly at the beginning that. So you can sign into the system. You'll be taken by default to the search page when you first sign in, but because your inventory will be empty, you won't be able to search for anything because there won't be any results because there are no containers. So I recommend first that you head to the inventory management page. And if you have any custom fields you want to store information in, you can create those from the Container Tools menu at the top here by clicking on this Custom Fields interface. Once you've created your custom fields, I recommend then that you run your Excel import to populate the information, build your locations hierarchy, things like that. And then once you've checked that, for example, by going to the locations page to view how things look, you can then create the user accounts for the different people in your lab, such as the students or postdocs or whoever else needs access to your information. And you can do that by clicking on this Add New User button here in the top right corner. So just before that, actually, if you notice after your Excel import that things aren't right, that things have been added incorrectly, and you want to clear out your inventory and start again, you can do so by clicking on this License and Settings button, and then there is the Empty Inventory tool that you can use to empty out all containers and delete your locations hierarchy from this page. So you can click on that, and then when you confirm that you'd like to do that, the system will go ahead and delete everything. If you do delete your entire inventory accidentally, say in a few months' time, we can reverse things from our end if need be. So if someone does go through and accidentally empty out your inventory, if an administrator does that, then that can be reversed if need be. but it's also a useful tool there if you notice during your initial import that something may have been wrong during the import. So yeah, that's the steps that I recommend you follow. Step 1, create your custom fields. Step 2, import your existing inventory. And step 3, create the user accounts for the different people in your lab. That sort of process is available from our support page, which is available at cheminventory.net/support. So if you go to cheminventory.net/support, there's a whole range of sort of tutorial pages available here. And the setup guide for group administrators is available from here as well. So if you click on that, it just explains step by step how to do what I've just mentioned now. The support web page also has a variety of other pages available that explains things like barcodes, using the generation tool, all that sort of stuff. So it's quite a useful page to go through if you need any help. If you do need any other assistance, please feel free to send an email through to our support team by sending an email to support@cheminventory.net. We'll be more than happy to help out with any questions that you've got. So that brings me to the end of this run through. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask them now. You may need to unmute yourself to do so, because I muted everybody at the beginning, but you should be able to do that through Zoom. If there are no questions, thank you very much for your time this morning. Have a good day. If you do have any questions that crop up down track over the next few days, or after you start playing around with the system once accounts have been created for you, again, please feel free just to email those through to us. Thank you.